Hello, everyone. Another month has gone by, and this is my monthly video vlog, different ways of people have talked about it. And I'm here joined today by Mary Kern and Marianna, who are on our council. And we're here to discuss a topic that is a huge topic. We're just going to only be able to touch on a bit of it here in this particular video blog, but it's really to open up the territory on this, particularly because of the importance of the time, like right now, which is the last few days of the Mercury retrograde. Also, what inspired me to want to do this topic currently is because these last days of the Mercury retrograde are happening within the context of the fifth chakra, Venus ascending gate, which is the communication throat chakra portion of the goddesses, sacred feminine's journey. So it's interesting that this most important point in the Mercury cycle is within that throat chakra or communication portal. Why don't you, Mary, can you put up that first slide? I want to just give a summary of the topics that we're going to look at here today.
Hang on.
This is titled the Magic of Language and Communicating Truth. It was there for just there.
No, I was trying to make it bigger, and I think we did. Okay. Little trick.
The magic of language and communicating truth. So let's go to the next one. And so these are the different topics. Whether we can cover all of these thoroughly or not, it remains to be seen. So we're going to talk about the meaning and intent of Mercury in our school. And actually, it's the 22 ways of approaching great mystery. And we're looking at the sun as great mystery. And there's 22 different synodic looping cycles of Mercury, that dive in and out of the sun. And that reaches the starting point at around age 7, right at age 7. And our definition of Mercury in the school is the different ways of perceiving. That is how we, quote, see what we see. How cognition, that how do we organize that? How do we understand what we're seeing? And then how do we communicate about it? So those are like the three key words for what is generally put into a larger category simply called thinking. Then we're going to do a brief overview of the Mercury overstories. Most recently, Aries to Leo, Leo to Sagittarius, Sagittarius to Pisces. But also a remarkable feature which is that if we go back to January of 2024, that was also a Sagittarian overstory. So we're now actually having another one that is kind of retracing some of the same degrees that was happening back in January, February, March, April of last year, or not last year, earlier in 2024. So this is on the throat chakra, Venus ascending gate. And then we have, we're going to discuss together a little bit the magic and alchemy of Mercury retrograde itself, because we're in the most crucial phase of that right now. And then we will have a little bit of a discussion about the difference between how Sagittarius and Pisces apprehend and communicate truth. We'll look at magical language, the relationship between name and form. What is truth anyway? It is actually the main inquiry within the Sagittarian overstory to begin with. So that's certainly a topic that has occupied philosophers for thousands and thousands of years. What in the world is truth? And I like to say that it's a moving target. So we're talking about the truth as it is, as you apprehend it, like right now. It may not be the same, next week. Examples, and then this is just for fun. the different ways in which the different Mercuries will experience reality, and then how they communicate about it. We'll come back to this later in our conversation. So what I want to actually start with, after getting this sort of pre-summary of what we're hoping to discuss here today, is we'll look at we'll take a brief journey through the Mercury cycle itself. So we can just maybe go through some of these slides. These slides will be available to you all, and they themselves are a great resource to understand Mercury. I do want to say that the deeper dive into how the Mercury cycle operates is a core part of our 5th course, which is on the synodic cycles, on the cycles of the moon and the 3 inner planets. But this is only going to be touching on how Mercury operates, so you have a sense of the importance of where we are in the Mercury cycle right now. And this is the whole concept of the synodic cycle, which we call the overstory, which is the fact that on the average of 116 days, and it can be sometimes less than that, sometimes more than that Mercury will go through literally everything that Mercury can do in any given cycle. And so let's start going through those, and we can give this overview. Well, synodic cycle, it's the pattern of the meeting between the sun and whatever planet, in the same way that the synodic cycle of the moon is the relationship between the moon and the sun, 29.5 days. So for Mercury, it averages 116 days. The shamanic astrology approach is to begin and end the Mercury synodic cycle at the stationary direct point. Now, this is a little bit different than what some other astrological organizations do, which generally begin it at the conjunction. But we base it on an old Babylonian understanding that was based upon the ability to see Mercury. And so basically they defined their Mercury cycles as having very distinct points when Mercury went stationary direct, but then when it also goes stationary retrograde, because those 2 points almost always mark where you can stop, where Mercury becomes invisible, or whether you start seeing Mercury again, all right, after it's had its well, we'll see a visual of it in just a moment. There are 3, sometimes 4 Mercury cycles per year, lasting between 106 and 127 days. The average is 116. The sign Mercury is in when it stations direct determines the archetypal overstory of the entire cycle. This is a slide presentation from 2021, before we changed the language to overstory. And this was on an old this is a class that we're going to offer as a resource to this video blog today, which was a seminar we did in 2021, and which I did with Alwyn at that point, and we were still calling it the overtone. Synodic cycles are the larger story. The larger story of what's happening with Mercury, different than just your own individual placement. Your own individual placement is going to be somewhere within the bigger story. So let's look at the next one. And this is just some basic information about it, summarizing what I was just talking about. If a person was born when Mercury was an evening star, there can be 4 to 6 different signs that a person can have as an emerging mind. If a person was born when Mercury was a morning star, there can only be 1 or at most 2 signs a person can have based on their own natal chart. By the way, I'll just mention here, this gives a whole different take on Mercury retrograde, because anyone who's born with Mercury retrograde within the overstory will have 5 and sometimes 6 different signs that Mercury will have gone through since the journey began. And this adds a complexity, a multifaceted nature to the Mercury retrograde. I'm always, I can't help but mention here that one of the more unusual features of my current family and where I'm living is that my wife, her mother, all of her brothers, and me, we all have Mercury retrograde. And also her brother's girlfriend just gave birth to a baby a few days ago. Also, of course, Mercury retrograde. So, I mean, I don't know what the odds on that are. I mean, to have literally everyone in the household Mercury retrograde. I mean, the only one who doesn't is his girlfriend. Everyone else, and it is definitely a house full of eccentric anarchists, I guess you could say, individuals that are not the normal, where normal is defined as average. So this kind of summarizes some of the material that we go into in some depth when in the Mercury class that we hold. So let's continue. I'm sharing this now so that you can get a sense of why it is we're having this conversation today, because we're like at this most magical point right now of the entire Mercury cycle that is within a larger context that I'm sharing with you now. So here's more Mercury number magic. Every 7 years, Mercury completes 22 synodic cycles. The fraction there is 22/7, which happens to be pi. Pi is the ratio of the circumference of a circle to its diameter. Pi is an irrational number. Its exact value is inherently unknowable. We'll go to the next one and you can see the further implication on this.
You want to finish reading this or go to the next slide?
Next one. Oh, I think there was, wasn't there one that said pie in the sky? Maybe not. I'll go back to that other one then. Yeah, so in our more extensive work, we have a whole day that we do just on Mercury cycles. Other astrologers have actually written articles about this entitled Pie in the Sky. You know, so basically you've got 3 Mercury cycles. When you try to fit it into the solar year, it's exactly the relationship of pi, 22/7. And then basically when you have, that's 3.14 into the solar year, but then you have 22 of these in order for it to come back to its starting point, which is why age 7 and other years are the important Mercury return times. So we'll go to the next one now. Now we're sharing this part now because there are many, many faces and phases of a Mercury overstory. Morning star Mercury is considerably different than evening star Mercury. And so the morning star is what we call Apollo. And that is something I borrowed from the astrosophy, Rudolf Steiner's version of astrology. And so morning star Venus is like a solar deity, logic, brilliance, clear teaching. But that's only one of many, many different phases or phases of Mercury. Another phase is when Mercury is on the other side of the sun. The psychopomp, a guide for souls. Mercury is helping people go in and out of the celestial, in and out of the underworld, in and out of the different, all the different places that a person's mind can go. And then the evening star Mercury, of which Mercury retrograde, the phase of Mercury retrograde is the end point of the Hermes phase. And this is the magician or the trickster or the shapeshifter, the thief, all these different other aspects of Mercury that are not just the logical solar brilliance logic kind of thing. And so we're actually Mercury is just about to be seen in the morning sky. So it's a soon going to be in its Apollo phase, but not quite yet. So let's see what that next slide looks like. So this is a diagram of the different phases of Mercury. And you can see here that where it says interior, that's where Mercury is now. It's on the inner track between the Earth and the Sun. When it's on the other side of the Sun, the other conjunction, that's the psychopomp phase, off the world stage, not retrograde. And then we have this as laying out the other different phases of the cycle, the guardian of the threshold. We're not speaking of that here today. And then you can see that we have this word metamorphosis for this interior journey of Mercury. And so why I say currently it's the most magical time period is that from the point of the Sun-Mercury conjunction, which was the Sun-Mercury conjunction was on, where's that? We have all, as part of for resources for you guys, we have all these tables to share with you. That'll come up here shortly, but I'm just looking at it right now, that when that conjunction was, maybe you have it there, Marianna, the Mercury-Sun conjunction. No, that's the wrong one.
Oh, here.
February 9th.
No, the one that just happened.
Oh, I don't have that part of the chart. Mine starts on December 15th.
Oh, the other one's from before. We have all the ones back to January. Anyway, there was, yeah, go to the one that is the
Interior,
Leo overstory.
December 5th. Mercury Sun conjunction interior.
That's it. Yeah, December 5th. So just a few days ago. So that was when the exactness of the Sun and Mercury was taking place, with Mercury on the inner track. And it's actually from that date until Mercury goes stationary direct on the 15th. That is the final phase of the shapeshift in the overstory from Leo to Sagittarius. So this would be the point that is most mysterious. Anyone born, let's say, on their own birth chart that's in this phase, it's the summation of everything that happened before, the surrender of everything that happened before, and then it's the infusion of the Sun just before Mercury goes direct on the 15th, which begins the next story, which is Sagittarius. Now, since we're looking at the charts right now, there's something that will come into this discussion, is the uniqueness of the Sagittarian overstory, because something really happened that doesn't happen very often, which is that there was also a Sagittarian overstory at the beginning of 2024. So let's take a look at that for a moment. January 1st, Mercury still point turns direct, 2210 Sagittarius. And then during this whole time period, you can see what Mercury's journey is. It's from Sagittarius through Capricorn, through Aquarius, through Pisces, through through Aries, through Taurus, through Cancer, up until it reached Leo. Just one little mistake in there. Never mind about that. So in this, so you can get a sense that they're during the entire overstory. It started in Sagittarius, and then the next one after that
you want here? Sagittarius, December 15th.
No, we're looking at
The end of the other cycle.
yeah, so by the time it got to, hang on, Aries, Sagittarius to Aries to Leo to Sagittarius to Pisces. The point I'm making is that by the time it gets to the next one, Mercury will have gone through 5 or 6 signs. And that's an example of the difference between whether it's Apollonian or Hermetic, or it's a psychopomp, or whether the phase that we're in now. Let's bring it to the current one. Let's go to the very end of the Leo overstory. Right. So Mercury still point turns direct 21 Leo. And so this is the one that is just about to end. And it went from Leo to Virgo to Libra to Scorpio to Sagittarius. So anyone who happened to have their birthday around now, they're going to have a Mercury position that encompasses all of those signs. And I'd have to say this is one of the, without question, one of the most unique ways in which our school looks at the Mercury cycle. It shows that anyone born with Mercury retrograde is going to have a far more access to different archetypes. So we could say there's a greater complexity, there's a more multifaceted. You can see how that would become like the shapeshifter aspect of it. But at the point of retrograde, which in this past cycle, the retrograde point, and this is one of the things I wanted to point out here. If you can use your cursor to show where the retrograde, yeah, let me make that a little bigger. Oh, that's so much more helpful. Thank you.
Station retrograde here on November.
Right. Now, notice the degree. 2240 Sagittarius. Now that was within minutes the exact degree of where the one in January of 2024 was. That was the beginning point of the previous one in January. And so now we have the still point turning retrograde at that same degree. And then from the retrograde point until the turning direct point at 6 something Sagittarius. So during this whole time period, which we call synthesis and metamorphosis, it's all in Sagittarius. So this is where the old Leo storyline is shapeshifting into the Sagittarian one. And then it emerges in another Sagittarian overstory on December 15th at the stationary direct point. Now how I tune into this is that from the point of the Mercury Sun conjunction at 14 something Sagittarius until the stationary direct point is this most mysterious giving birth. It's as if like the old Mercury is consumed, we could say consumed by the sun, and is transformed fully into the next overstory, which is Sagittarius. Go ahead.
I'm just curious from hearing you speak, if in fact I sense or feel that it's almost like it's saying a whole new truth is emerging, because we've been in Sagittarius twice, like you said, and that's unusual. And there definitely is a lot of new truth emerging in the collective for sure, and I think even for individuals. But it's so powerful. And
Yeah, and since in our understanding, and not only our own understanding, but many other forms of astrology would look at it the same way, is that one of the core things about the Sagittarian mystery school is the love of truth, and then the intention to quest for meaning and purpose, and to look at it as an adventure, to go into new territory. But this brings in the unique way that our school looks at Mercury retrograde.
yes,
Now it's very interesting that since the establishment of logic, intellect, linear science, and things like that, that people assume the world works in a logical, linear way. Mercury retrogrades 1,500 years ago, they wouldn't have had that assumption. So every Mercury retrograde is designed to shift away how we normally take things to be working. And that's the main reason why, just in a more mundane sense, people are warned that in Mercury retrograde not to sign contracts or to make clear decisions and so on. Now, our own view here is that during Mercury retrograde, it's a time period to do inner work. So how does Sagittarius do inner work? If the tendency of an externalized Sagittarius, this reputation of Sagittarius is Mercury as perception, cognition, and communication. Mercury has this Sagittarius has this reputation of just blurting it out, like unbridled telling what you think in that moment is the truth. Our suggestion is that during Mercury retrograde that it is directed inside. That same fearlessness, intuitive zeal to communicate and to bring it out is turned inside, because the results are going to be quite unpredictable. But having said that, if we think of all of the different Mercury positions in the last year, I mean the overstories, Sagittarius, Aries, Leo, Sagittarius, 4 in a row that have been fire signs, intuitive function, 4 in a row. Now there's a big shift that happens. The next one is going to be Pisces. And so next year is a really shift in that, but still Sagittarius and all the fire signs and the water signs are more right brain. In other words, they're not versions of Mercury that are beholden to linear logic. So they themselves give the opportunity to go beyond the assumption of linear logic reason. Why? Because Sagittarius is like the tip of the arrow, the tip of the spear, the intuitive function. It's like when you just grasp something immediately. But what happens if you turn that inside and you just hold back before you actually blurt it out to other people, if you catch what I mean? So the same thing with Pisces. So actually each of the Mercury positions will have a different way to cognize, perceive, and to communicate about great mystery. That's their function. That's what Mercury's function is anyway. Different ways of perceiving great mystery, different ways of understanding great mystery, and different ways of communicating about it. But the time period we're in right now, and even thinking about the different degrees, the 7 Sag which is the still point of the point on the 15th when Mercury goes stationary direct, does refer back to a point in the previous in looking at the cycle, because I do care a lot about these degrees. The 22nd, 23rd degree is super important, as it was super important back in January. Also, this 6th, 7th degree point today, as we speak, Mercury. This we're doing this recording on your December 11th and my December 12th. But as we speak, as we're recording this, Mercury is at 744 Sagittarius. And so therefore, over the next few days, of course, it's still retrograding, and it will then reach the 6th degree, 23 minutes of Sagittarius. But in the previous cycle, we see, I'd made a note about this. Let's look at the one that, sorry, the previous, the August through December 15th one. There are points where Mercury is in Sagittarius. It entered Sagittarius when it exited the underworld, and went into 4th sign change. Look there at 0 Sagittarius, and then maximum elongation was at 17 Sagittarius, and on November there are like these really key dates when Mercury is at that 6, 7 degree. And then on December 13th, same degree is stationary direct. January 3rd, back to that same degree. So I'm putting emphasis on those degrees, but it's just really looking at the importance of the days we're in right now, just prior to the full moon. Anyway, there's a lot to unpack there, and I'm just sharing all of these tables with you here, so you can do your own research on this, and maybe it will inspire you for the to take a deeper dive into the Mercury cycle. But on a practical level, we're in the most mysterious time period in order to be doing this conversation about the magic of language and communicating truth. Different ways of apprehending great mystery and then communicating what is the best way to communicate what we are perceiving and what we're cognizing. No, just as a reference here, if those of you this is all new to you, maybe, who are listening, about the Mercury overstories, you might be curious about what your own is. What story were you born in? And so we have shared with you here these tables. And what these tables show is what sign Mercury was in at stationary direct. So you can just go to the one before that you were born. So, I mean, I was born in 1948. And so therefore the Mercury before my birthday was Gemini, July 5th, 1948. And so, because I was born October 10th, so it's the stationary direct before my birthday. And you can use this particular reference to find out what your own overstory is. Like, Marianna, what is yours?
What's my overstory? I was born February 7th, 1982, and my overstory is Libra.
Yes. And Mary?
Mine is also Libra. At least that's what I've always believed.
Well, let's check it out, Mary. So
yeah, I'm thinking maybe not. September 2nd, 1950. So
it's Capricorn.
yeah, yeah.
So that allows you to see what's larger story you're born into. What's kind of funny about it is that people, over the years, I've always made seemingly disparaging comments about the shadow of Gemini. And yet my own overstory for Mercury is in fact Gemini, which is sort of a cosmic joke on that. Anyway, that's as much as I want to do with taking you through the synodic cycle stuff. But I did want to now maybe dive into the conversation about the magic of language and how would, oh yes, we have this, we have these other ones. Excellent. Okay. This is showing here now the way in which the Mercury positions operate. And so we have the air signs, which are related to the thinking function, the fire signs that are the intuitive function, and then the sensation, the earth signs are sensing, and then feeling being the water signs. And so that those are the elements by which those Mercury positions are intending to work through. So therefore, it's through the medium of those elements and those psychological functions that that journey in and out of the sun, that journey of perceiving, cognizing, and communicating about great mystery would operate. So fire, intuitive, is very quick. I got it. Feeling is, oh, I can really feel into that. That feels right. With the earth ones, it's always more like practical. You know, that works. You know, that makes sense. Even the expression that makes sense, sensation. All right. And then the fire. You know, I got it. Or the air. I get what you mean. You know, it's all about being able to see the thoughts themselves. And while Mercury is always placed into the larger category of thinking, there's different ways that operates. Pure thinking, the air signs, the intuitive, very fast, right brain, the earth sensing, which is more left brain, practical, objective, and then the feeling, which is the water signs, which is going to be more about something that's harder to explain in our current age, where the feeling function has been many people are disconnected from it. It's sort of the mammalian heart, the ability to how do we create value through our experience, you know, things like a certain way of how do we determine how we love, you know, not as a thought, but as a feeling. You know, so we have the 4 different ways. And of course, each of them is going to have their own unique expression. But what about Sagittarius? Non-retrograde Sagittarius is designed to just quickly grasp something. You don't even have to quote figure it out. It's like, yeah, that I get that. That I sourced it. It's more like connected to the logos. You know, I mean, science knows this. I mean, you know, Einstein got it, and then he created the mathematics to try to explain it to other people. You know, it wasn't because of the data and the information that he put together in order to come up with his intuition. So this just gives you a sense of the different ways the Mercury positions can work. You know, and I mentioned that over the last year, every one of them has been a fire sign, starting out as Sagittarius, and then Aries, and then Leo, and now again going into Sagittarius in preparation for the Pisces one, which is radically different. But none of them are fixated on logic, reason, linearity, data. You know, so it's a whole different apprehension of great mystery in the fire signs. So again, it takes us back to the importance of the time we're in right now. So what inspired this conversation today? What is the next slide you got up there? I'll briefly go through that. Go back to the one before. So there are certain key dates, 7, 13, 26, 33, 46, 79, 92, where the precision of the returns are exact, or within a few days of exactness. And this is, again, just a deeper dive. This shows you what our deeper dive into the synodic cycle material actually is about. So any of you listening to this today, if you happen to be around 7, 13, no, 26, 33, 46, 79, or 92, you'll be in a direct Mercury return time period where the original set of instructions are reiterated. There are other time periods where it's pretty close, and we've given the other dates on this. This is an opportunity to revisit the original intent of the archetype of the emerging mind. But the topic today is based on how to use this last portion of the Mercury retrograde and then going into 115 days of the entire Sagittarian overstory is in this speculation about what is the magic of language and how is the best way to communicate truth. And this topic was motivated by some comments in our last Venus and Inanna revision class with Marianna and Mary both there, when we were talking about what happens with language and how you can determine what's true. And so we're talking about this whole situation of what element, so like earth is going to determine it differently than water or air. Air, you can just, well, I'll just try to figure it out. Earth, it's well, what's objectively real? Water, does it feel right? But with fire, it's the courage to go beyond the limits of where the mind has previously been. I'm always I'm often reminded of something William Blake once wrote. So he who attaches himself to a joy does the winged life destroy. He who flies with it then goes into the eternal sunrise. So if you just free yourself up and not attach yourself to a specific truth, but are investigating all the possibilities without any dogma, without any attachment. And then if you have taken the time to go in with this and to not blurt out what you're finding until Mercury goes direct, then you can actually be more certain that what you have found is in accordance with what your truth is, or what the truth is. What is the truth? Now, this is our discussion now. Now, way back when language first developed, magical language, or the original languages, were what put together name and form. So what you would sound out would have a correspondence with what is being named. So many examples of this in the literature. If you know something's real name, then you, in a sense, you really know it. I mean, and then some can use that in a negative sense. Then you would have power over it. Well, I would look at it more as a reverence. As an honoring of what you're perceiving in the world. You give it its real name. Unfortunately, the more languages become abstracted. I mean, if you say dog, how do you know that word, which came from 5 or 6 different traditions, has any relationship to that animal that you happen to have as your pet. Or let's say you're in China where they eat dogs. They might have a different word for dog, which is, if it's a name and form relationship, it would have to do with something good to eat, you know. So it's like what it's a big topic about the right naming of something. English language is pretty abstract. Now, consider what happens when you actually have it's dumbed down to texting language. Texting language, which is about as far removed from a name and form relationship as anything I can think of. So going back in earlier times, you know, some will say that the original Hebrew language, some will say that the original Greek, some will say that original Turkish, some will say that the Finnish language is a much, or German, is a much closer connection to the word and what is being named. But how does that relate to how to communicate? Now, I'm going to open this up to your experience the two of you have had with this, but I'll tell one story. There's always been this experience I've had that when I speak something, if there's a passage in a book, let's say, that I thought that was particularly significant, and I speak it out, it connects more strongly. Or if I sometimes will speak out the words of a song that was particularly important to me, even like back when I was a boy, speaking out those lyrics evoke so much internally, emotion, feeling, but even more. There's some, and I guess it depends on your Mercury position. I have Mercury in Scorpio, Capricorn moon. If I speak something, I can sense into whether that it's true. And many times I'll speak out something and I'll feel, no, that isn't right. And it's one of the reasons why when I do my presentations, I will digress or jump around. Because if I say something, I'm realizing I'm not saying it as precise. It's not exactly what I was intending to communicate. And so I circle around and try to say it in a more precise way, you know. And then it's like it's based on a sensation. It's based on an emotion. You know, it either feels right or is it objectively true? Those two for me, Capricorn and Scorpio. Now, remind me, you two, what are your Mercury positions? Not the overstories, but the one you're born with on your natal chart?
So it's Capricorn and my moon is Taurus. So they're both Earth.
Earth. Mm-hmm.
Daniel, you are so right on about the way you articulate. That was one of the things that's always drawn me to you is your use of words and the precision of them. And it's like when you're speaking and you've got that all in alignment, it rings true, which to me is a sensing thing when something rings true. Just as when someone's lying to you and you sense it, it doesn't ring true. It's just, it is a visceral kind of a experience.
Yeah, well, and I can really tell within myself whether I'm on or off, you know. I mean, if I'm really on a flow, then there's this thing that sometimes happens where it comes out of nowhere. It's like the exact right word at that right moment, you know, which is about the best thing we can do at this point when we're dealing with a language that's not so magical. To be able to say it in a way that feels right, and generally if it feels right, then other people can get it. And Marianna, where's your Mercury? Remind me.
I'm Mercury retrograde in Aquarius and Leo moon.
Yeah, so you have there's two of us here with Mercury retrograde, right? So that's and where are you before or after the conjunction with the sun?
Before.
Right. So you are in, like, same as me, in that most complicated, complex place of Mercury, right before it has to surrender it all, because the very next overstory after you is going to be the Aquarian one.
And I really felt like that was a liberating statement. And I've heard you say these things before, but for some reason it really hit the last time we were in the Venus class, because in this retrograde cycle and reflection to what's going on this year, we're back in the Sagittarius point, looking back at, I want to say, this January point. And we had Mercury, with the 3 passes over Antares and the Scorpion constellation behind it. And it's like, well, there's 2 truths there, right? Like there's the intuitive and there's the feeling function that's coming in. And I feel like we're being redirected, like Mary said, like to a deeper truth that's from the heart, as this collective unconscious, I want to say, is moving towards Pisces, so we can come into more of that intuitive function. But for me personally, like thinking about this and my own chart, and I have my my sacred marriage process in Libra with Pluto and Mars, and that's my overstory. So that's my retrograde starting point. And so for me, it's been really liberating to finally understand why I can't let go of the old program of the old Libra, and because I'm meant to actually surrender the old story to move into the new one, and how stuck I've been in the old ones. And it's really interesting with the Leo moon, like, I got it, but no, I don't get it. It's coming in a whole other way. And so it's just given me a lot of reflection as to, what you're saying right now is taking these truths, being more directed in towards us and not about what's going on. Because for so long it was like, I would, it had to be linear, or it's, it's my fault, or, something like that. And it was like, it's really about redirecting ourselves inside and coming back to that question, like, is this true? And can I sit with this place and really be in that reflection and that redirection of that surrendering process into the next? Because communication is the gateway to consciousness. Everything is about what we're perceiving or cognizing, and it's how we're communicating it. Like you always say, it's not just to the outside world, but it's to the inner world. And when we speak things out, song, and I love that you brought in how language has been so colonized, and so lowered that it has no, those, like, that deeper feeling to it. And and I love music too. And so it's like, when we can sing, and language originally was singing, we would sing to the earth, the sky, and one another, and in ceremony. And, that rings in the heart, that rings in that connection. And, the more we get into language, we're coming into these upper chakras, and the boundaries become more thin. We're not in the individual chakras. We're not really in the heart. When we start to come up here, yes, we're supposed to come from the heart. But if these boundaries get really thin, we're tapping into so much of the collective. And now we've got so much, I want to say, media and propaganda and the phones, and this idea of truth is becoming thinner and thinner. And I just love the setup that we're in right now with the Scorpion constellation, to go inside and to really feel into the heart with Antares what that truth is, so that we can actually move in this way of consciousness and really look back at this entire year and maybe take a moment to honor how far we've come, so that we can see where we're going.
Oh, just I want to just indicate one thing here, which is that might be confusing to some of the ones that are maybe watching this or listening to it later. The reason why the moon has been brought up is because in this paradigm, our view is that if you do the contrast between the old storyline, which the moon is telling us the most about, and then you look at the Mercury position, it's a contrast, we could say, between the old Mercury and the new Mercury. So therefore, if somebody has a Leo moon, then we're like, we can't know this for certain, but the assumption works really well is that your previous Mercury mastery was Leo, and then it's moving into the one you're born with now, including its overstory. So it's always a contrast between these. That's why I mentioned my Capricorn moon. So for lifetimes, we could say my Mercury was Capricorn, and this time, and I get to work with Scorpio in the Gemini overstory. I just wanted to bring that in. But then the other factor that's so interesting, since you're bringing, Marianna, the, uh, the constellations and the stars, what is really incredible about the Sagittarian overstory is that there's many points in the Sagittarian overstories where Mercury is with galactic center.
Mhm.
And which is 27 Capricorn up in, I'm sorry, 27 Sagittarius up to 0 Capricorn. So that's another thing that these tables can be very useful, is to see during the times that Mercury happens to be lined up with the galactic center. So that's, I think, a very important part of this, including the whole time period where it's going over the Scorpion. So they have the Scorpion stars, Antares, and then basically many times there, and then many times going to be at galactic center. And I think that what that suggests to me, that it's where the dysfunctional or no longer useful or more addictive versions of thinking, including the shadow of Sagittarius, which is dogmatism and fundamentalism, can be thrown into galactic center and be composted and be eliminated, so the freshness of perceiving and cognizing the Sagittarian intuitive logos truth can be perceived without that other baggage that would have come.
And I think with that, Daniel, and this is what I was saying earlier, I think it's really auspicious and beautiful that we're at the ascending throat chakra gate, because the throat chakra is called Vishuddha, and that translates to purification. And if we don't purify this, we're not getting what's coming in, and we're not getting what's coming in from our heart to come into that truth. And so I feel like this larger message, like what Mary was saying, is we're coming into this deeper truth from the heart that can only be felt to really.
Yeah.
Well, all of the chakras has been one of the main messages of our Inanna group, is that it's
What's that?
actually the heart is the center of all of it. I mean, but
Yeah.
it's the mediator of all the rest of them.
There's
Yeah.
one of the, I have to bring in for a second, because you were talking about people born at the retrograde part of the cycle, having gone through so many of the signs to get there. And I was born right before that, so I went through 5 or 6 signs too. And learning that, understanding that when you're born in that part of the cycle, you're actually filtering through all of them to come, it's like you're going deep and
Mhm.
then coming up with a conclusion. And that really helped me understand how my partners have always been fire signs. They've always shot from the hip. I've never been able to come up with a retort in a conflict situation until the next day. And I so frequently find myself saying, could you please let me finish my thought or my sentence? Because fire signs, just naturally, they're just shooting from the hip all the time. And I think for other people that experience that, this is such a beautiful way of understanding why that happens. And it's nothing wrong with you. It's just you go deeper and sometimes come up with something that's deeper because of it. And if all of this is in earth signs, that adds to it.
Well, and that's actually, Mary, thank you for this. Is more of a practical consideration on all of this. That in personal relationships, the awareness about how the different Mercury positions operate can be a crucial thing in how to get along.
Yeah.
You know, so like, for example, I've often have been, people have said, Daniel, you're always interrupting. Well, there's a certain enthusiasm to want to share. And so if I'm with another person who's the same type, it's not a problem. It does not matter, you know, who finishes the other person's sentence. You know, you're just kind of jumping really fast into it, dive deep, you know. But if there's an individual who doesn't operate that way, like what you've just said, you know, if you're with somebody who's just going rapid fire really fast, and then the earth signs take time in order to thoroughly process it and sense into it, we could say, you know, that just that alone can help relationships. You know, and then you have, let's say, two people who are with both both the air signs. You know, you have the Libra version of it. Well, what do you say? What do you want to say now? Oh, I don't know. What do you want to say now? You know, so it's just all, it's all completely uh, just about being polite to the other person, and you might not even get anywhere. Or then the Gemini communication, where basically, or Aquarius, is that people are just talking, and they're not even hearing the other person at all, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You know, it's just like having an opportunity to just riff. You know. It's definitely, this material is definitely worth yet another full seminar on Mercury, and I think maybe a good time to do that would be when there's this massive shift, elemental shift from the fire sign ones to the water sign ones, because there is something quite remarkable happening in March, at the end of March, early April, when both Mercury and Venus on virtually the same day, I mean, the same week, are beginning new overstories. First time Pisces in over 100 years, and then Mercury. We have to go back a few years to have Mercury in Pisces, you know, and they're both going to be starting their journey at the same time. Which well, that'll be, I think, a good time to revisit this material in some depth. Well, I hope that we've given a bit of a framework of understanding the importance of the time we're in. We have resources here for a deeper dive into the 6th and 7th degree of Sagittarius, the 22nd and 23rd degree of Sagittarius. As Marianna pointed out earlier, before we started this discussion, that 22, you know, which is the magic number for Mercury in a lot of ways. And it kind of ties into our discovery in our school that the coven is not 13 anymore, it's 22. You know, so you can actually keep the focus of a group really clear up to 22. There are 22 different ways of perceiving great mystery. And we really value that 22-ness of Mercury. I think as a last thing here that I want to share, since we're speaking of the magic of language, but also of maybe the symbols for language, there's this rather interesting story about Thoth. Now, I'm going to speak of Thoth here because, of course, Egyptian Thoth became Hermes in the Greek world. You know, so it's Hermes and Thoth represented essentially the same god. And so Thoth, together with Seshet, and some say Seshet, the female version, was actually the one who taught Thoth until patriarchy turned it around. But the story goes, and the story comes from Socrates, actually. that Thoth had just invented the hieroglyphs. So he'd come up with the written language at that particular point. Now, the king of all Egypt, it was the god Themis, who lived in the great city of the upper region, which the Greeks call Thebes. To him came Thoth to show his inventions, saying they ought to be imparted to other Egyptians. But Themis asked what use there was in each, and as Thoth enumerated their uses, expressed praise or blame according to what he approved or disapproved. The story goes that Themis said many things to Thoth in praise or blame of the various arts, which it would take too long to repeat. But when they came to letters, in other words, the written language, this invention, O king, said Thoth, will make Egyptians wiser and will improve their memories, for it is an elixir of memory and wisdom that I've discovered. But Themis replied, the Pharaoh, most ingenious Thoth, one man has the ability to beget arts, but the ability to judge of their usefulness or harmfulness to their users belongs to another. And now you, who are the father of letters, have been led by your affection to ascribe to them a power the opposite of which they really possess. For this invention will produce forgetfulness in the minds of those who learn to use it, because they will not practice their memory. Their trust in writing, produced by external characters which are no part of themselves, will discourage the use of their own memory within them. Now, if you think of what happened from that time period, it's gotten even worse. Because the original hieroglyphs actually, to a certain extent, did describe what they represented. But as language has become more and more abstracted, and I guess many will say, who are listening to this will say, yeah, well, what about the book? You could read the book on the alphabet versus the goddess. But it's just something that happens in Kali Yuga that takes us further and further away from the actual experience of reality. And so we're going to the external representation of it. So why am I bringing this up? Because again, it goes back to something that Sagittarius is super into. Speaking. It's the ability to bring it out, to be able to speak the words, which is actually even in the Bible, the beginning was the word, not the written representation of it, but the actual sonic, the audio, the ability to speak it, which is what essentially makes human beings, very different than many of the other animals.
But I have a question on that, because is speaking it, taking it from the right brain to the left brain? Because I've always heard, well, particularly if you see some vision, some scene that takes you into a sense of awe, which is a connection with oneness when you're in awe. As soon as you speak it, you've taken it from the awe and brought it more into the linear. So I'm curious about that piece of it.
Well, I think it probably depends on what particular Mercury you're working with, because something that I brought up at the beginning of the call is that whether you're speaking the words of a song you love, or you're speaking out a passage you've read in a book that you knew was important, that it's the awe and the reverence of what opened your heart. So it is, the purpose of it is to praise. It's an act of praise. And then you bring that into the actual experience that it evokes in you when you speak it. So I don't know, maybe I'm saying this based upon my own Mercury predilections. But I mean, it is also the case that there's value in reading. Reading, because that a lot, when you read something, it's more of an inner journey, right? but that, which unfortunately in our age of technology, everything is looked at on the outside. So that's why I think maybe the ability to speak what you read, or to speak or sing what matters to you, connects you to the magic and mystery of our lives. You know, so that I don't know. I just that Thoth Pharaoh story is it really, it was right at that all that happened right at the beginning of Kali Yuga. You know, and that was the time period when language, written language, originated, because before that it was all oral history. You know, and so the oral history where people were able to use aspects of their brain that how many of us can still go into those lobes of the brain, you know, where the ancient people could easily remember 100 lineages, and you know that they could remember all the stories. You know, all the stories were there, and they were kept from generation to generation. And then you tried to write it down, but then that takes you out of the ability of the mind to really continue to directly experience it. I mean, think of those Vedic pundits that can recite the entire Vedas, let's say, but they're not even connecting to what they're speaking out. You know, so it's like they've used the externalization of the truth to disconnect them from what the actual essence is.
A lot of uses, a lot of different uses of language, because even with mantras are used to trick the mind into silence, really.
Yeah.
Just so, and some languages are considered vibrational, where the sounds of the words actually create the vibration of the meaning. I think
Yes.
Sanskrit is one of those. So
This conversation could go into many other directions, including how we name constellations and how different cultures see the constellations differently. You know, like what do we name a dog anyway? Is it a, you know, it's a large topic, but I think rather than trying to come up with any dogmatic answer to any of this, it's the reason we're doing this right now is just due to the really importance of this particular Mercury cycle within the heart chakra. I'm sorry, the throat chakra gate of Venus, and the fact that the galactic center is involved in all this as we move toward the December solstice time. And this is a time to to have the courage to find out what is true for you, and to not relate it directly to what other people say is true.
well, thank you, Daniel. I've enjoyed this. It's good. Okay.
And this, hopefully this will spark further conversations along this, and I'm sure it will be for all three of us right now based on what we've talked about. So I hope it's inspired other people to want to learn more about the Mercury cycle, and to see that these days are the most alchemical and metamorphic and portion of the whole Mercury cycle right now. So brilliant.
Yes, very creative time. All right.
Thanks, you too. All right. Till next time.
Good to see you. Good to see you, Marianna.